Right, all. Thank you for joining a session dedicated to SAP. So hope the keynote was informative for everybody. To introduce myself, I'm Bas Kamphuis. I run the partnership with SAP. And we wanted to use the opportunity at the SKO this year to kind of inform you what we're doing with the SAP partnership, how we're thinking about helping customers actually set up for the wave of innovations that obviously are coming out of the broader platform. And I have some guests joining me as well today, but I'll introduce them later. So show of hands, who's familiar in some way, shape, or form with SAP? Very good. See if this resonates. Friend of mine, Derek Pryor, used to be the SAP lead analyst within Gartner, has for years studied the actual success rate of SAP implementations and projects. And what he discovered, which resonates with a lot of customers, is that 50% of the SAP implementations fail to meet the expectations of both the IT owners as well as the business owners. And success identified as being on time, on budget, and maybe more challenging, on value as to why you actually started the upgrade project or an initial implementation, right? Some of the top-line findings, and it comes with the complexity of the software, is that almost 50%, 36% actually really on the negative side, is not coming in at the original timeline. Almost 50% adding neutral and obviously the negative answer is spending more than they originally budgeted. And then obviously the real difficult thing to do is deliver the business value as to why you actually started the SAP implementation. So combine these numbers, 50% of the stakeholders are disappointed in that sense. And these projects often cost anywhere from $80 million to sometimes even $500 million to implement, right? That's a real gamble with a 50% success rate. Now, different direction. SAP is investing tremendously in simplifying the world. And this is kind of their vision, where we used to have R3 and ERP systems. At the core of it is a database technology called HANA. HANA is in memory, therefore much faster and able to be queried and enable enterprises to run real time. And around that core are a number of SaaS solutions that are emerging and platform as a service, PaaS solutions to extend it. Right, so that's the vision as to where it's going. S4 was launched about 3-4 years ago and is slowly finding adoption in the enterprise. But in the background of a 50% failure rate, many customers are struggling with the when do I make this jump? I'm only setting this up kind of to talk to you about why is AWS different, right? Now, SAP has communicated to its customers that the traditional databases, Oracle, DB2, Microsoft SQL, are no longer going to be supported by 2025. Partly to incite the jump. But against that jump, a customer has a tremendous amount of unknowns. Who customized what in my system? Can I actually upgrade? How much will this cost? And how much effort is involved in actually making that jump to that vision of a much simplified enterprise that creates value and is on budget and on plan? Okay, step back. What do we do within AWS? We started our relationship with SAP in 2008. We've since then, based on customer feedback, started adding a whole bunch of solutions that customers would love to see and utilize on AWS. So We went to business objects, business one, all-in-one, simpler OLTP suites, if you will, and we started working on HANA. And with HANA, it's, as mentioned, an in-memory database technology that has a high reliance on parallel processing. It required a different chipset, which ultimately leading to us making a strategic choice to actually build a platform specific to HANA. That's built on the Intel E7 chipsets, which are required to actually deal with the massive amount of processing that needs to occur. We launched a 2 terabyte in 2016. Since then, we extended it to 4 terabytes. And for OLTP workloads, as background, they only can be scaled up today. OLAP workloads, so the business warehouses, can actually scale out. And we moved that from 14 to 50 terabytes over the last year. So those are, in today's industry, really unique capabilities because it is cloud native, right? It actually means that it's fully automated. You can have a HANA system of 4 terabytes in half an hour. You can also give it back after an hour because it's the same on-demand model that you guys are familiar with. And that led also SAP properties to actually run on AWS. By and large, the cloud properties of SAP are actually running on AWS. And give Cloud Platform, which is the platform as a service layer, HANA Enterprise Cloud, which is the managed service cloud offering from SAP. We think about properties like SuccessFactors and Concur. They're running on AWS, providing customers actually vicinity in actually integrating these solutions as well, right? Which then ultimately led, over a year, if I was here a year ago, I would have shared about 16 customers that were public around their migration of mission-critical workloads to AWS. Today, this is the slide. And that's in a singular year, customers are moving en masse to AWS for their SAP workloads. And there's a reason why. They all are making the jump over that chasm. They all need to consider a different architecture to power these HANA implementations. And as such, public cloud becomes a real attractive option, obviously with all the uncertainties that our customers facing in these transformations. Now, as we started with infrastructure as a service, we started to also get different customer requirements. How do I actually integrate my big data lakes with my SAP backbone? How do I leverage some of the cool technologies Werner and the team talked about in enabling new business processes, right? So in the green, you're seeing something we're heavily involved with right now together with SAP in actually bridging the innovation platform with the emerging technologies within AWS with the SAP core systems. At the bottom, you see the two lift and shift or transform to HANA offerings. By and large, every single SAP solution is actually certified to run on AWS, which we'll come back to, gives a little bit of peace of mind for customers as well. In the yellow side, you're seeing the cloud properties, and we continue to do more and more there as well. And then what we really recognized, obviously, with this tremendous customer momentum is that skills are needed. Skills are needed to make sure that the architectures are compliant, are able to scale, are secure, are certified, and architected for resiliency. So one of our leading partners there is Accenture, and I'll let Chris in a moment talk a little bit about the innovation that they're driving around the platform. So partners of AWS are different than some of the experiences that I've had in the past. We actually go to great lengths to make sure partners have a direct line access back to our engineering teams and our enablement team and our commercial teams as well. So it's a unique set of relationships and access that they get. We pretty much do a partner advisory boards for those partners that have served multiple customers to make sure they have the latest and they share the learnings. We also make sure that we do workshops so that they have the skills. And lastly, obviously, we validate and test the experience. Partners on this slide all have done multiple successful customer implementations or migrations. We take that very serious. A little bit about the compute platform, right? So guys are probably very familiar with the colorful rainbow slide that articulates the breadth of the compute portfolio. I highlighted the ones that actually are uniquely certified by SAP to serve SAP workloads. Further articulating just the breadth of options customers have on AWS, it doesn't come down to just an X1 platform. And obviously, these instances are available worldwide and can scale across availability zones or across regions. We also are doing a lot of work on the bare metal, a bit more about that in a minute. The X1 platform specifically was really innovative about a year ago. Our ability to software define a virtualized instance that actually in many cases performs better than the on-prem targeted hardware servers was a huge game changer. That's why these customers actually have chosen to make the jump. And as such, we talked a little bit about it. We're going up to 4 terabyte and scaling out to 50 terabyte. Now the 50 terabyte, in all honesty, we've not seen many customers go beyond that yet on the HANA technologies. But the 4 terabyte addresses about 96% of the customer install base. It's not sufficient for all workloads. So we need to go beyond 4 terabytes. And we've announced that around mid-2017. For the first time, we actually became public on a roadmap. And for those of you that are very familiar with AWS, we don't often share roadmaps. Now, in this case, it's very important because customers need to know that there's actually room to grow beyond the current ceiling, right? So we announced the 8 terabyte coming out in 2018, as well as a 16 terabyte instance for HANA. Now, at that point in time, you can no longer virtualize, which is where you saw the bare metal option on the color graph. The amount of innovation that's going to actually make sure that there's a cloud-native bare metal solution serving HANA databases up to 16 terabytes is tremendous. And just for context, a 16 terabyte HANA system is probably an 80 terabyte Oracle system, right? Serving a mission-critical business operation. That's tremendous. So with the introduction of these instances later this year, we believe that there's pretty much virtually no customer out there that wouldn't fit on AWS for their SAP workloads. So that was the technology, right? Go back where we started the conversation. How does that help you actually secure a higher degree of success in implementing SAP? So what we're trying to strive for here is to give you cloud-native speed, but also cloud-native agility for originally designed to be very stable and predictable systems. Obviously, still staying highly secure, compliant, and resilient, and ultimately providing flexibility. So a little bit more about resiliency and security. We have the trusted advisor, also applies to SAP workloads. We actually can monitor the systems and help you identify ports that shouldn't be open. It's got the most amount of industry certifications as well as SAP certifications. So that gives a peace of mind. The global scale is unprecedented when we think about HANA workloads. And then very many, for those of you that are architectural experts, there's a many amount of options out there to actually create high availability and disaster recovery options underneath those platforms to make sure the RTO and the RPO requirements for that system are being met. One of the examples here is Lockheed Martin actually relies on the AWS footprint to not only secure the environment, but also define the standards by which organizations actually within Lockheed Martin get to deploy SAP solutions. On speed, a thing that is unique to AWS is actually the Quick Starts for SAP. The Quick Starts for SAP don't just set up a server, they create an entire environment when it comes to mission-critical environments, fully automated. It's a fairly simple script with only the minimum amount of requests in order to define what that environment needs to look like. And within a half hour, we set up the SAP HANA system. It's a huge enabler for speed, where a customer today, if they actually wanted to deploy an SAP solution, would need to start to look at the hardware requirements, then look at the available vendors that could supply this environment, then actually secure the budget to get that environment, order the environment, and install it in their data center. You're talking about a 6-month delay to the project. Customers that actually deploy on AWS can start within the hour, right? And that's hugely differentiated, and it's partly empowered by Quick Start. An example of that is Brooks Brothers. Obviously, clothing and apparel. One of the things that they have experienced is that SAP introduces a bunch of net new improvements to the core platform. But their ability to actually test those improvements, do a user validation and a business validation that the improvements are worthy of implementation, and if not, fail fast. If they want to go forward, they can deploy it. If they believe it's still not quite addressing the business needs, they obviously fail fast. Is hugely enabling and making them a little bit more competitive in their specific industry segment. Now, in the flexibility I mentioned before, AWS has, by and large, the most complete portfolio of SAP-supported products. And there is a lot of change coming. Digital transformation is happening across many platforms. Some of it require SAP solutions. There's safety in mind that AWS customers enjoy in knowing that they can jump between database platforms without having to change their underlying infrastructure. They can actually innovate in the emerging technologies that AWS provide without affecting what the core solution that actually hosts the chart of accounts or manages the customer records that lead to sales transactions. And these moves become a lot easier because infrastructure is automated and near infinite in scalability, right? So this is a key benefit that customers that move to the hyperscale cloud, in this case specifically AWS, enjoy. The ability to innovate much faster. And if the innovation is just a proof of concept that validates that the system is not quite ready yet, or the organization is not quite capable of consuming the innovations, fall back to the solutions that's already deployed, is very beneficial. One of those customer cases is Fairfax Media. They were running a BW system, so the data warehouse, and decided to upgrade to the next version that SAP launched. And as they deployed it, they discovered that the size of the system no longer was sufficient. They were on a 0.5 terabyte and now needed to be actually on a 2 terabyte. That took them 5 minutes to actually cut over. Another one of those examples is BP. BP was in such a rut with Oracle in an audit that they wanted to actually show the Oracle that they actually were not a captive audience and they had choices in choosing different database platforms. Within 4 months, they actually migrated the mission-critical system supporting the entire downstream lubes business to ASE. That was hugely liberating for BP. And since then, they've obviously deployed several solutions on HANA. They originally had a timeline of 3 years to move everything to AWS, and we worked together with them on that, and they actually are accelerating the implementation of their entire SAP footprint, which is massive, obviously, for a multinational like this, in 18 months, and they're on track to deliver that. Now, lastly, a couple of things that were actually are starting to work on with SAP, and we launched about a year ago. With all that power in speed, flexibility, and agility, what could you actually do different? So together with SAP, we've taken one of the tools, their asset called the data migration option, which actually can take a system in a source state of an Oracle database, extract it, and actually in the target system land it on a different database version, on a different version of the SAP application software. Now, what we did in this case, because we're talking a migration to the cloud as well, is we broke the process in 2 steps. One step is extracting the system. The other step is actually importing the system and doing the conversion to the next generation of software. We've automated that fully, begin to end, and we're now able to take an average system, upgrade it to HANA, and run it on AWS, which are 2 experiences customers need to make a determination if they want to go, in a 48-hour period for around $1,000, which is basically the X1 infrastructure at that point in time. So instead of sizing and scoping what the next version of the software would do for you, you get to actually just experience it. You get to actually test it. A sizing workshop, on average, is a week of consulting time by itself. And then when you get to a size target, you probably don't want to buy the hardware at that size because you're going to assume 3-year growth. And then at that point in time, somebody smart is going to say, well, what if our growth projection is off? We should buy a bit of headroom in this system. None of that is no longer relevant. It's okay to make the wrong size decision, because once you actually transfer and migrate, you get to experience the flexibility of the AWS infrastructure and actually move to a size smaller or a size bigger. So we've done that for many customers over the last 12 months. Some of them that I can disclose, obviously, our own Zappos, from Amazon's perspective, is at the top. They actually had a 2.6 terabyte Oracle deployment, and we're able to migrate that to AWS, upgrade it to HANA in 29 hours. Now, it was just a test migration, right? From there, they actually get the functional people to actually test the system and make sure that it's valuable. But it shows the power of that migration. What they also discovered is that they actually thought, based on the sizing report, they needed to buy a 2 terabyte appliance. But once they did the migration, they discovered that at the time it was 650. I think they went live with 800 gigabytes. So they failed over a 2 terabyte system to a 1 terabyte system in less than 5 minutes, reducing their infrastructure cost by half. Right? That's the power of the cloud. That's why the old barriers to infrastructure no longer are the same. And that obviously creates a very different success rate. We don't see customers that either do a lift and shift, that do a net new S4 implementation, that do a conversion from an older system to a HANA-based system. We don't see them fail. We typically actually see them exceed the original timing that they set up. It's going faster than planned. They get to make different choices as they go along. The implications of making the wrong choice are different. Zappos, to build on that example, was actually deploying their solution manager tool on DB2 until somebody said, maybe we should deploy everything on HANA. We have the licenses, it's not a big deal. In any different scenarios, that would either be a contract negotiation with your private cloud provider, or it would require buying new hardware. With AWS, the choice was made, and within the next couple of hours, the system administrator actually had a working copy of HANA, and the project kept going, allowing them to actually deliver everything on time. Very different. And on value, I showed you fast. If you actually could spend less time anticipating what the future will bring, but you could test it and make a real determination and an informed decision as to what you want to do in terms of your migration path, a lot of risk is being reduced in these implementations as well. So with that, I want to invite Chris and Chad. So Chad is a friend of ours that actually works for a company called Del Monte. They actually did a migration that Chad will share a little bit about. And then Chris is with Accenture. Chris and I work very closely on helping customers succeed world round. So with that, thank you guys.
All right. Hello, everybody. Chad Anderson. I started working with SAP in college, and I was a functional consultant focused on sales and distribution way back when. And as my career has progressed, I was given the opportunity to lead our migration. It was quite an experience. We had a lot of fun doing it, to be totally honest. Domani, it's been around a long time. I'm sure you've all heard of Domani at some point or another, have had our products. We are in the canned food business primarily, and when we talk about IT, what we need to do is we need to be as efficient as possible. We need to give this business every chance to make $1 out of every can. So we are always constantly fighting to drop our budgets, to drop our costs, to do things more efficiently, and that's probably what really drives us on a day-to-day basis. We're about a $1.7 billion business. Our subsidiary, we're owned by a parent company, but the U.S. business, which is what we're talking about here today, is about a $1.7 billion business. We sell everything in big pallets. So when we just to give you some scale of our SAP system, we don't have a lot of SD transactional volume because we're selling at like large, giant pallets. I used to work at Levi's, and schedule lines were one pair of pants at a time. So we just have these massive volumes of data. Our ERP ECC6 system is maybe 2.5 to 3 terabytes of transactional data, and it's about 3 years old. Our journey to the cloud. So we got to the point where it was kind of like we need to figure this out, guys. We got to see should we be doing this? I mean, I think everybody's kind of wondering about what are the benefits of moving to a place like AWS. And the business driver in the end was very simple. It was about ROI. What we realized is that we could take advantage of what Bas was talking about. We could take advantage of the automation. We could take advantage of the ability to size up or size down very quickly. And over time, we were going to save a tremendous amount of money on our operations. And that made the decision very clear. Why AWS? AWS, we were able to kind of check all the boxes. We fit the parameters of what was capable in that platform when we made our decision. We had an RFP process, and we didn't have AWS come in. They came in as kind of a partner, but the companies that were going to help us with the transition, nobody was pitching anything else. Nobody thought that this could be done if you weren't going to do this on AWS. Now, that picture changes certainly every day, but to me and what I see, AWS is still clearly the leader. Obviously, the other thing was just moving to AWS. I mean, it's kind of fun. It's like being on the new version of Xbox or the new version of the new gaming platform. You get to kind of, we got our stuff to work there, and now we can kind of take advantage of all the other things that come with it. And everybody is developing their products to work with AWS. So when we want to look at firewalls, when we want to look at new ways of doing or integrating with Anaplan or using SnapLogic or some other type of tool, we know that we're in a place where we can take advantage of that type of integrations and et cetera. So in the end, we were able to do this in 3.5 months. Chris was saying earlier that when we started the first version of the presentation, I'm going to steal your line, but they said, oh, it's going to take about 7 months. And we said, okay, then we're not going to do it. That's way too long. It's going to run into our kind of pack season, and that's not going to work. And we really got them to kind of go back to the drawing board, work with AWS, and help. And I guess I'm stealing your thunder a little bit. Facts and figures. So we have we have a kind of ECC6. We're at that version level of our world. We run SRM, we run ECC, we run BW on HANA, we run SCM, we run EWM, we run CRM, and basically every SAP product that was available for sale, we bought at some point. So that's kind of where we're at. We had 25 terabytes of data across those SAP platforms. We also, in that 3.5 months, we moved over 100 servers, because you got to move your. We took it as a whole, right? We didn't try to piecemeal and say, okay, well let's move some stuff over here and not move other, and that was really critical to success. It turns out the cloud is it's not really a cloud. The laws of physics still apply. You can't move half of your applications to someplace and expect them to talk at the same speed that they were talking before. Latency matters. So for us, we really needed to make sure that everything was going to work the way it did before. And a lot of that version of product and a lot of our legacy applications expect to be sitting next to each other. So choosing your zone, knowing what your latency is, those are absolutely critical things to decide up front. We achieved this with zero business disruption. What I would say is we took a long maintenance weekend to do our production systems, and we took our migration plan was stacked. So we did our dev systems all at once, then we did our QA systems all at once, and then we did production. And so the approach was always to kind of work on our cutover plan, understand how the applications were going to communicate. A lot of things that plagued us were things that would happen in any data center migration. The re-IPing, getting the applications communicating, figuring out what the password was for the server that we lost the password on. For us, what's next is really stabilizing our core. So we've been live since January, and it's been phenomenal. Since day one, we have been able to complete our batches. We've been able to run our business. We were aggressive with our sizing, so we wanted to make sure that we took advantage of the fact that you can scale up or scale down your box. So when we migrated like for like, we would pull CPU away or we'd pull RAM away to try and save money. And we had we had some times where we'd like, okay, let's pull it back, and then it's a 30-minute reboot to add RAM or something like that. So just kind of unbelievable what is capable now and how you can run things. It's just so agile. I think that's it for me.
So as Chad said, my name is Chris Weidman. I'm with Accenture. I lead Accenture's global partnership with AWS. So for those who don't know, right, Accenture is a huge SAP SI. So a big part of our business is doing SAP. We've done it for since we started. And as we looked at working with Domani on making the migration to AWS, everything that Chad said and Boz said were key and fundamental. As we said, when we first looked at this and looked at the timeline, right, we applied some of the traditional timelines that we had to order hardware, to install hardware, to configure the hardware, and we looked at it, and as we went through the planning process, it was very obvious that we could cut that time down tremendously. So as we said, we started it at 7 months in the original planning. We brought that down to 4 months, and we did it in 3.5 months, right? And it wasn't just a lift and shift, right? That's not the value of going to cloud. So when you go to cloud, automation is the most important portion, right? Automate, automate, and automate, right? That's what Amazon has done to be able to do what they do, be able to deliver at the scale that they do. And as a customer, if you're not doing that yourselves, you're not taking advantage of the platform. So, where did we focus and where do we focus with our clients, right, who are making this transition, right? It's through the automation, and it's really taking it from both when you start at the planning phase and your configuration phase, through your build phase, through your change phase, and most importantly, in the run phase, right? Because your value comes during the run, right? Once you've done the migration, if you just, put your feet up on the table, right, you're completely missing the point. So, throughout, everything we do and the tooling and the capabilities that we have built have been focused on automation throughout. And I think, as Chad talked about and others, you'll talk to other customers, they're going to tell you that's where the value has come from. One of the things that we thought, everyone kept saying, you can't do DevOps in SAP, right? I'm a 20-year-old, 20 plus years of technical architecture, right? I wasn't a big SAP person, but I've done big monolithic applications in my past. And everyone kept saying is you can't do DevOps in AWS. Well, what is DevOps, right? DevOps is very much about automation, promotion, cycles, moving code in and out, things like that. And that comes with automation, right? So if you focus on the automation, so when we set out to build our tooling around AWS and to help our customers, really focused on that automation, right? What's the pipeline, right? What's the infrastructure as code, right? If you're going in there and configuring and doing manual tasks, you can't do the stuff automated, right? Automated testing, right? Continuous monitoring and making sure that you're testing for security as you go. That's the most important part. I would say our customers have turned from skeptics to believers over the last 18 months. I think every conversation that I went into around SAP was always, I don't think we can make it happen, right? And Accenture supports some of the very largest customers on SAP. Right? So they said, yeah, we see these other companies do it. They're small, but we can't do it. We've seen a big shift going from now to believers, right? As you saw the slide earlier with all the logos, they believe, right? And they are using it as the heart of their migration to AWS and their heart of innovation. Once you put SAP there, like Chad said, right? You've got your core data there. You've got your transactions. You've got everything. And you can now start leveraging the other AWS services to innovate on, right? Build out those new data warehouses, our data lakes, to put on top of it machine learning, analytics, things like that. Poly-Lex, which a lot of our customers are doing. They're using it as an integration, using those capabilities to integrate with that data and expose that data through voice. So, I think if you're working with SAP and you're looking at, how do you jumpstart your migration to cloud and leverage the innovation of AWS, moving the heart of your system and the heart of your organization is not a bad place to start. So with that, Boz, I don't know if you want to come back and Chad, willing to take some questions and answer anything you guys have. If you ask the questions, I'll repeat them as well. Go ahead, right here in front. So the question is, with AWS, what type of storage for SAP do you support?
So we support EBS as well as EFS, S3. Steve Jones is sitting right next to you. He's my technical counterpart, and you can probably go a lot deeper there, Steve. But.
So EBS for your persistence layer, S3, the block storage. Yes, excuse me. So we do support EBS for SAP systems, of course, for persistency. S3 is a major use not only for data lakes, but also for things like backups and things where you want to take advantage of multi-AZ availability. EFS for some components of the SAP stack. So yes, all the things that you know and love about AWS storage are available for SAP.
Right behind you.
Bas, you mentioned about the FAST program. What is it? I mean, is it a set of scripts? Is it some consulting? I mean, is there more information on that you can provide?
Yeah, so what's the FAST program? The FAST program is combining the conversion tool in the data migration option from SAP. It's created a number of destination templates to quickly provision the ASC system or the HANA system that you actually want to migrate to. And there is kind of a reference methodology to say step by step by step, this is how you go about executing a fast migration. So the name was kind of invented by me as the fast AWS and SAP transformation, right? Now, it's not exclusive to AWS, so SAP wanted to rename it quickly to not have the word AWS in the title, but we still refer to it as fast. Ultimately, there's no magic there. The DMO tool is a tool that has been out for 15 years. The problem with the DMO tool was, though, that you needed to have 2 massive servers in the same data center, very closely co-located, because it would actually read one transaction and commit one transaction, and only after the commit be able to take the next piece of data out of the source system. So the innovation here was really that we disconnected it and made the extraction a full run, and then the import and implementation a full run. So that's the innovation there. And to Chris's point, it's the same principle around automation, right? The more you can automate, the faster you can actually go. And then the price point that I mentioned, full transparency, SAP is not charging for the licenses or the consulting time that they are able to support these migration with, neither do we. It's really just articulating what it takes to run 48 hours of X1 capacity in an on-demand pricing model, right? So to give you a price indication. Now, obviously, most customers that do a fast transformation, you saw one of the world's biggest consumer packaged good companies on the customer reference slide. They moved a 25 terabyte Oracle system in 38 hours to a HANA BW system. The actual testing starts after that has happened, right? That's where the users actually start bouncing against that system and deriving value and making recommendations as what to do next. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say from a partner perspective, Amazon will help you with that. Partners will help you as well. We help our customers do everything after that as well, right? And so understanding what's not working, do some of the testing and help kind of build that overall plan to then take it to production.
Hello.
Right here in front. Mike, somewhere? We'll start back here and come back to you.
So for Chad and Chris, did you have any concerns about the security of moving a sensitive application like SAP to cloud storage? And the reference point is around the Spectre meltdown vulnerabilities, where someone could, get an instance on AWS and then look at other memory locations on that same tenant. So using a shared space for that sensitive data, were there any concerns about that?
Yeah, so I will tell you, our head of internal audit is absolutely in love with our AWS data center. The process to get a SOC 1 report out of them is I can order it from my phone and it'll be on our desk in the morning. It's unbelievable how much easier it is to have visibility, and for them, they built in a lot of automation about how they can deliver security reports, et cetera. We also, we installed Splunk as well, and so we're finding that we can just get tremendous information out of our environment. And then the other part is that it is, to us, we were in a VPC, and it just feels like a VPC. It's still a tenancy that you control, that you have firewalled off. We firewall in between our environments. We now have, all of our systems are encrypted underneath, which we weren't able to have before. So our security posture, and I hate that word, but our security has increased dramatically in this environment. And then the other piece of it too is that with the kind of level of automation that we're seeing, we're just like right on top of getting everything patched now. It is such an easier process, and because it's easier, we're doing it. Sometimes we'd fall behind because it's a heavy lift to make sure that we get everything patched or get things regression tested for a future patch. And that's where the automation is like, we are very much able to stay current in kind of our patching strategy and our security strategy.
And one of the things I would encourage you to do, whether it's SAP or moving other workloads, take your CISO, take your audit people, and really spend a lot of time educating them on the AWS security approach and the shared responsibility model. I've helped many clients go through this, and it's a night and day difference when you include them in the discussions, right? They may not be the most deep technical people in the world, but after they sit down, after they spend the time, after they go through that, they're in a much better position, and they'll be much more comfortable doing it than before. Yeah. Right here in the front.
Thank you. Could you briefly talk about HA and disaster recovery in the AWS Cloud?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't cover this, but we were able to implement an HA design in the same region where we're at, which is amazing. We had like a kind of a traditional DR scenario before, so we were able to kind of get that, and that's where I think of like moving to that next level platform. You start to get the opportunity to implement something like HA at a very competitive price by just being like moving everything and taking advantage of the tools that are available on the platform.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's a big change. Going from DR to HA and AWS in your design is a big difference, right? Because most of our traditional vendors, it's a data center migration, right? Or sorry, data center DR strategy. So everything has to get lost for that data center to go over, right? And when you design your systems now, it's not. It's a true HA design where you're making sure you've got availability in your near zone as well as somewhere else. So I think it gives you that much more protection, that much more availability, and it shouldn't even be a thought. If you're designing for a DR situation, you're not designing right on AWS.
Yeah, and those concepts get a little bit blurred, right? So I pulled this slide up. The simple thing is cloud recovery, and Werner just was talking about how that's getting better as well. But for $1 a month, you can just monitor these systems and rebuild them in the case of a failure. Then, of course, there's optimized high availability, where there's actually a minimized copy that could be operational in short order, but not contain all the data and the data could be rebuilt as you move along. And then there's many options in terms of full HA and a disaster recovery to go beyond availability zones to different regions as well. And we see customers have their own interpretations of the level of resiliency they actually want to do, right? It's obviously expensive to have full copies of these already expensive systems on permanent direct standby, but that's an option, right? And the lines between HA and DR get a little bit blurred because of the flexibility that the platform provides. But there's many options. We provide reference architectures, and based on what a customer or a partner feels comfortable with, they implement that. Now, it's where Accenture helps, right? This is where I was talking about the need to have skilled partners to help actually design clients through these processes. And Accenture has been a leader in saying, okay, for an average BW system, if it's okay to be down for 4 to 8 hours, right, because it's not mission critical, then maybe auto recovery is just good enough. And you would save a lot of money, especially in these larger deployments. If it is the system that without it being operational, I won't ship, fruit will actually go bad in a facility somewhere, you probably want to create a fairly rigid implementation, and the cost that takes is justified, right?
Don't confuse the Amazon SLAs with the SLAs of what you're trying to get out of your system.
Fair
That's
point.
the worst thing I've seen people do is they look at the Amazon, S3 or EC2 SLA and say, well, that's not what I have today from my vendor. Well, you're looking at it completely wrong.
Yeah, all you get there is the compute instance, right? When you look at the EC2 SLA, the architectures around it obviously dramatically improve the failure of an individual system in an individual availability zone. So you can get multi-nines. You could architect for that.
And when we talk to our customers, we break our systems into two different types, whether they're SAP or other systems. The cloud-aware systems that have been designed for AWS, and other ones that have been lifted and moved, right? Because there's a different SLA that I can guarantee on ones that have been architected.
And from a customer perspective, we got higher SLAs for less money. So it works out by taking advantage of it.
The system move through the FAST program, is it achieved in 48 hours through the size of the data or through the closest reason?
So you're saying what determines the ability to move that quick or slow, depending on the system? There's a couple of things, right? First of all is, of course, the connectivity back into AWS. Do we have direct connect, or is it actually a much slower pipe? We've seen customers that actually have a fairly limited bandwidth, and we used a solution called Snowball to actually extract the system, then ship the data to an access an entry point and then upload it, which obviously slows down the ability to move fast. But there's different technologies. Data size is absolutely a factor, right? How big is the source system? Combine that with the width of the pipe, and that allows us to kind of make an assessment on how fast we can execute. What is also very much a factor is how far behind is the source system. We've seen some systems that customers hadn't patched for years. And so in order to actually get to a base target layer to do the extracts, took time, right? It takes time to install and apply enhancement packs in the SAP world. So sometimes that could be a factor as well.
But all that's a learning experience. I think that's what's important,
sure.
right? Is people are afraid, they're afraid of the unknown, right? And by going through that process, they learn how many packs they need to apply, how long it takes to go do that, how long it takes to go move the data, right? And then actually see that it works at the end. So it's a learning experience, and it's much more efficient than sitting on a piece of paper and trying to guess. That's my biggest thing I've seen out of it.
Yeah, experience it, right? And so I've honestly, and Steve with me, and of course Accenture, we've never had a CIO or an SAP application solution owner say, I'm not interested in experiencing this. This is a game changer. The ability to, if you will, put on some virtual reality glasses and see the future of your environments, walk around in it, and figure out actually what you want to change. All by automating the first migration. Right? It's hugely enabling, and therefore I actually make the claim that I believe customers that run SAP on AWS are not seeing 50% failure rates and disappointment in making these deployments. They're seeing much higher success rates. And if they don't, it's a very light decision. If they don't like the upgrade that they just went through in 48 hours or let it be a week, then throw it away. Wait a year and then take another fresh look at it.
How about any DB? Because FAST is designed for HANA migration. But what about non-HANA DB?
So FAST is designed for an ASC migration or a HANA migration, right? In terms of Oracle lift and shift or DB2 lift and shifts, we do that all the time. If the customer actually is not interested in that first move to muck around with the database, but basically go source and target as is, those are really easy for us to do, and we do these types of migration relatively quickly, right? For mid-size organizations, that entire project is less than a month. And that sets then the customer up to innovate from there, right? If that Oracle DB-based system is running on AWS, the ability to take a clone, upgrade that to HANA at that point in time, learn in that experience is valuable as well. So every customer journey so far has been fairly unique. Everybody has a little bit different approach on how to actually architect these environments and actually the journey and what they're after in the upgrade. And that's why I showed you that flexibility slide. All these choices can be made, right? It can fit whatever the IT strategy is of the individual customers, which is super powerful. Any other questions?
We got one back here in the back. Yeah. Two more.
I have one question. Traditional large enterprises generally have their SAP HANA instances on-prem with large systems, multiprocessors, a lot of memory per socket, right? That has been the case. Now with SAP HANA being available on AWS, are you seeing traction for large enterprises moving to cloud, away from on-prem, which has been the case? If so, what are the key reasons there are key drivers that making them move to public cloud, or in this case, AWS?
So great question. Let me paraphrase you to make sure. Are the largest and most demanding customers moving their workloads to AWS, and why? Well, so HANA in a way it's natural, even for the most demanding customers, to look at the public cloud, because you have to buy a purpose-built infrastructure, whether it's on-prem, a private cloud provider, or a public cloud provider. Now, the public cloud provider is more agile and flexible, and usually a lower TCO. So in that discussion, we get there. But there's, of course, as I mentioned, the 4 terabyte for some of the largest customers is a blocking point. Now, I can, with great confidence, and BP is a great example, or a Lockheed Martin, right? Or a Fast Retail, which was that Uniqlo logo on the customer slide. Some of the world's most demanding SAP customers have already made that transformation. And the reasons they're doing it is because of that chasm, the fear of the unknown cost of running the enterprise on HANA, and then the risk that you're taking for the system actually breaking in that transformation are all greatly reduced if you work on an on-demand infrastructure, because you can actually react to whatever you experience and learn. Now, those are customers that are actually public about their life, right? As AWS, we're actually right now serving hundreds of the world's largest enterprise customers. It's been a phenomenal 18 months ever since X1 came out that enabled these customers to go over. And some of them go with BW first on HANA. Some of them go straight to S4. If you're going to deploy S4 Greenfield, right, it's not a migration, of course you would start on AWS. It's the easiest way to get started. You can start right now. Some customers have massive migrations, like BP. We see all of those. And now with the 8 terabyte and the 16 terabyte bare metal, fully software-defined and automated environments coming available within 2018, there's really no customer that doesn't fit it. Now, truth be told, there's customers like Nestle that actually exceed the capacity of the 4 terabytes. So they're waiting for that moment. But yeah, I feel very bullish about what we see customers do today and what it enables them to do, because none of these businesses has the option anymore to say, let's go through a HANA migration for the next 18 months. And what do I get out of it at the end, right? It's really hard to define. You're guessing what you get out of it at the end. All of these CIOs actually have a fiduciary responsibility to show speed and allowing the business to actually focus on the digital transformation, which is around leveraging machine learning, IoT, and those type of technologies, not operating the core backbone in the back office. So yeah, we very much, with X1, changed our focus to help make the most demanding SAP customers successful, and that's been the change as well.
So for our enterprise customers, what we see is exactly what Boz said. I would say 4 years ago, they were moving to save money, right? It was I'm gonna close down data centers, just like Werner talked about today in the keynote, right? We still see that, but we've seen a shift over the last 18 months of they're moving because they need to innovate, right? Their businesses are having to innovate, and they need a platform to innovate on, and they don't have the time, and quite honestly, they can't do it, build a platform like AWS, right? So they're making that move so they can innovate. And what do they need to do to innovate? Well, in some cases, they need their heart of their environment, SAP, to be in AWS so they can innovate around it. So we have seen a shift. I'd say the customers I talk to on a day-to-day basis, innovation is probably the #1 reason they're asking to move.
One last question. In addition to that, do you get to hear about, hey, my servers are just sitting in my on-prem, and when I go to the cloud, it's going to help me on the efficiency part of it. You know, I'm not going to, let's say if on-prem I have 100 servers. By moving to the cloud, I'm going to consolidate. I don't need 100 servers, and my cost is going to go.
That's a key part of making the business case, right? So the business case, there's really what we see 3 parts of when we do an enterprise business case, right? You look at, first of all, right, your staff supporting that, right? You're not racking and stacking servers, you're not doing it, right? So there's a savings there, right? In a lot of cases, there's a savings on utilities and floor space at your location, right? The other thing we see is capacity, right? You can assume pretty heavily in your business case that you're gonna reduce the amount of capacity that you're using because you're overscaled, almost everything. We start with 30% and go higher in some cases, just assumptions to start, but in almost every one that we've done, we've seen that you can optimize, as much as 70%. So yeah, absolutely.
TC, okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, and that's super interesting, right? We have a joint customer in Australia, actually, which was a mid-sized customer, right? The amount of change that they would flow into their production systems was limited. So initially, they went live and said, okay, the dev system and the QA systems only need to be up 40 hours a week during business operations, and then I can shut it down the rest of the time and actually save that value of these servers standing around and give it back to AWS, and it takes 10 minutes to bring it back up. And as they, to your point, Chad, as they actually start getting much more data on how that dev system was being used, they discovered there was probably a good 10 minutes of use per week on that system. So they now, right now, are just starting it up at 10 a.m. on Monday morning and shutting it down at 1 p.m. on Monday morning, and they're waiting for the request, right? It's an entire system landscape supporting production that you don't need to pay for at that point in time. So there's all those type of cost savings as well that lead that customers sometimes claim that they save 70%.
It's one of the biggest new roles in cloud is that person that's going to sit there and look at how do you optimize your environment. You know, we used to have capacity planners that would sit around and figure out how much servers they need to buy and plan 6 months ahead and how much storage and stuff like that. You never wanted to get caught short on storage. Right now, it's a different role. It's a different role is how do you drive it down, right? And how do you continue to optimize it, leveraging RIs, leveraging other stuff to do that. And you know, we do it through a tool we call Accenture Cloud Platform. There's all kinds of different ways to do it, but that's a skill that you have to build or get a partner to do for you.
There was one more question.
Yeah. What was the biggest challenge while migrating SAP on-premise to the AWS Cloud, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, probably I would say the biggest challenge we had was dealing with the latency. We had a couple of blocking issues where we really didn't know whether we were going to get everything transferred. So the transfer rates is something that you really want to be mindful of. And you kind of start the conversation. You're like, okay, well, I need a pipe that's going to be a gig or 10 gig or whatever. But when you get into it, it's actually the individual transfer rate of each server that really matters. And your latency of where you're moving from and to becomes critical. So we were able to achieve, I think, 30 megabits per second on the Linux boxes and 15 megabits per second on the Windows boxes, something like that. And so once we had kind of gotten everything set up, we started doing those first servers. We were getting less than a megabit per second transfer rate, and it was a blocking issue. We couldn't figure it out. We were, weeks went by where we're like, okay, well, I guess we're not going to do this. But in the end, something was like basically just throttling it on the outbound, saying I thought it was suspicious traffic. And so once we removed that, everything passed through. So that was probably the biggest one that kept me up at night. The second one was just around having to really ensure that all of our external and internal systems could talk at an application level. So we, through the discovery process of having to kind of change the IPs or change whatever we needed to, we found that we had a lot of hard coding everywhere. And so how do you test for all those scenarios? You have to talk with your external partners. So there was a lot of work that kind of popped up in that, and that was also just a lot of just hands-on work to dig through and figure out what things needed to be changed. And so taking that whole approach where we could do dev and then we could do QA, we learned everything kind of that we needed to leading up into production and made it almost perfectly smooth.
Okay, guys, we're out of time. Wanted to sincerely thank you, of course,
Yes,
Chad.
Absolutely.
And Del Monte for sharing your story. Chris for sharing the Accenture focus on allowing customers to succeed. If you don't mind, do you have another question?
So the question was, have we used DMS?
No, DMS is a different service from what we do with FAST, right? We've been talking about FAST specifically. If you guys do us a huge favor, give us some feedback in the tool. Love to improve, obviously. Anything is fair game. And with that, have a great remainder of your summit.